when a mother chose him over her. She was only 6 when her parents separated. Her name was Emily. A quiet little girl who loved holding her mother's hand whenever they walked to church on Sundays. Her father, James, was gentle and kind, the kind of man who'd lift her onto his shoulders just so she could see the birds fly higher. But all that changed the day he left. Emily could still remember the argument. The yelling. The sound of a plate breaking. The silence that followed. And then, just like that, her father was gone, leaving behind a promise he never got to keep. And then, 1 year later, Rose met Daniel. Daniel was charming at first. He brought flowers to the house and called Emily sweetheart. He helped fix the broken window, took them out for ice cream. To Emily, it felt like sunshine after too many cloudy days. She wanted to believe this man would fill the empty space her father left behind. When Rose married him, Emily smiled in every photo. She didn't know that her smile would soon be the last real one she'd have for years. Everything changed after her mother gave birth to 2 baby girls, Grace and Sophie. The house that once echoed with laughter became quiet, cold, and full of rules Emily didn't understand. She wasn't allowed to play in the living room anymore. She wasn't allowed to eat until everyone else had finished. And whenever Daniel was home, she stayed out of sight. At first, Rose would still hug her sometimes. But slowly, even that stopped. Emily loved her baby sisters more than anything. When they cried, she would run to rock them to sleep. When they laughed, she felt a warmth she couldn't explain, like they were the only light left in her world. But as Grace and Sophie grew, Daniel's tone grew sharper. Rose's patience thinned. Little things turned into punishments: spilled milk, forgotten chores, or being a few minutes late from school. Emily learned to keep her head down. To stay quiet. To smile when it hurt. She didn't understand why her mother seemed to love her less. She tried harder every day, cleaning, cooking, helping with the babies. But nothing she did was ever enough. Some nights, she'd sneak to her sister's room, sit beside their bed, and whisper stories about a house far away, one where no one ever yelled, where love was warm and simple. Sometimes, Grace would wake up and touch her hand, whispering, "I love you, Em." And that was enough to keep her heart beating. But soon, even those small moments of peace became rare. Daniel started telling Rose that Emily was a burden, that she wasn't grateful, that she was becoming a problem. And Rose, already hardened by years of disappointment, began to believe him. She stopped asking if Emily had eaten. She stopped waiting for her to come home from school. It was as if she had decided that one daughter was one too many. Emily was only 13 when she began skipping meals so her sisters could eat. She learned to drink water to fill her stomach. She learned that crying only made things worse. But no matter how much she suffered, she never stopped loving her mother. She kept hoping, maybe one day, she'll hold me again. Maybe one day, she'll remember I'm hers. Then one evening, it happened. Emily came home from school, her uniform torn from an accident on the road. She tried to explain, but Daniel's face turned dark. He shouted, accusing her of shame, of carelessness, of being useless. Rose stood beside him, silent. And when Emily turned to her mother, eyes full of tears, begging, "Mom, please, I didn't do anything," Rose looked away. That look broke something inside her. That night, Daniel told her she couldn't stay in the house anymore. He said she was old enough to find her way. And Rose said nothing. Emily stared at her mother for a long time, waiting for her to say no, waiting for her to fight for her. But Rose didn't. She just stood there, arms folded, and whispered, "Go." Emily packed what little she had, a torn dress, an old photograph of her father, and the teddy bear she used to sleep with as a child. Her sisters, Grace and Sophie, cried and clung to her legs, begging her not to leave. but their mother pulled them away. Emily turned back one last time. Her mother's eyes were cold. Daniel's were proud. And for the first time in her life, Emily understood that love could disappear, even from the person who gave you life. She stepped outside into the dark, barefoot, heartbroken, and alone. That was the night Emily stopped being a daughter. But it was also the night she began to find herself. The streets were not kind to a girl like Emily. At first, she thought it would only be for a night, that maybe, by morning, her mother would open the door and call her back home. But morning came. Then another. And another. The door never opened. She slept under an old bus stop, her school bag for a pillow. She begged for food when she could, and when people turned their faces away, she learned to smile through her hunger. Every night, she would whisper her sisters' names into the dark, Grace and Sophie, praying they were warm, fed, and safe. That thought alone kept her alive. Days turned into weeks. The uniform she once wore proudly was now tattered, and her shoes had holes. The world moved on as if she never existed. Sometimes she would see families walking hand in hand, mothers laughing with their daughters, and she'd have to look away because it hurt too much. Other nights, she would sit near the bakery down the street, where the smell of bread filled the air. The warmth of that smell reminded her of everything she had lost: home, love, safety. But she still believed that one day, life would be kind again. One cold evening, she fainted outside that same bakery. When she woke up, she was lying on a couch inside, covered with a blanket. A man was kneeling beside her, holding a cup of warm tea. He looked to be in his 20s, with kind eyes and flour on his hands. "Hey," he said gently. "You're safe now. I found you outside." His name was Michael. He was the owner of the bakery, a small one he had built with his savings, called Sunshine Bakes. For the first time in years, Emily felt kindness without reason. Michael didn't ask where she came from. He didn't demand explanations. He just offered her food, warmth, and silence, the kind that heals more than words ever could. She started helping him around the bakery, cleaning, arranging, learning how to bake. And slowly, she found joy again in the simple things: the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of customers, the sound of music playing softly in the morning. Michael never treated her like charity. He treated her like someone who mattered. Over time, Emily began to smile again. Not the forced, broken smile she once wore at home, but a real one, full of light. Michael noticed. And one day, he said softly, "You have a beautiful smile, Emily. It makes this place brighter." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Months passed. The bakery became their shared world, a place where pain slowly turned into purpose. They would wake early to knead dough together, laughing when flour covered their faces. They shared stories about dreams, fears, and the small moments that made life worth living. Emily told him about her sisters, how she missed them, how she hoped they were okay. But she never talked about her mother. That wound was still too deep to touch. Then one evening, as they closed the bakery, Michael said quietly, "You know, you don't have to run anymore." Emily looked at him, unsure. "You can stay here," he continued. "Not as charity, not as pity. Just stay. Build something new. You deserve that." Her eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for years. No one had ever told her she deserved anything before. That night, for the first time, Emily slept in a warm bed, not as someone's burden, but as someone who was cared for. Years passed. The bakery grew busier. Emily grew stronger, her smile brighter, her heart softer. And somewhere between flour-dusted mornings and quiet late-night talks, she and Michael fell in love. Not the kind of love that comes from stories or promises, but the kind that grows slowly, the kind that feels safe. They got married in a small ceremony behind the bakery, with only a few friends present. Emily wore a simple white dress, and when Michael placed the ring on her finger, he whispered, "You're home now." And she knew he was right. Because for the first time in her life, she finally had one. Years went by like pages in a diary, quiet, ordinary, but full of meaning. Emily was no longer the frightened girl who once slept on cold streets. She was now Mrs. Emily Carter, co-owner of Sunshine Bakes, and a mother to a little girl named Lily. Lily was everything she had ever prayed for: bright eyes, warm laughter, and a heart so full of kindness that it reminded Emily of the child she once used to be. Every morning, Emily would braid Lily's hair, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "You will never know what hunger feels like. You will never sleep cold. You will never doubt that I love you." And she meant every word. But sometimes, when the nights grew quiet and the bakery lights went off, old memories crept back in, like shadows she couldn't escape. There were moments when she'd wake up shaking from dreams of her mother's voice, the sound of that door slamming shut, the echo of her own cries outside the house. Even in happiness, pain had a way of finding her. One afternoon, while she was baking with Lily, the bell above the bakery door rang. She turned, expecting to see a customer, but instead, she froze. Standing there was her mother. Older now. Hair streaked with grey. And behind her, Grace and Sophie, her half-sisters, all grown up. The world around Emily seemed to stop moving. Her breath caught. The smell of bread turned to dust in her throat. "Emily," her mother whispered. "You've grown so much." Emily's hands trembled. For years, she had imagined this moment, what she'd say, what she'd feel. But now that it was here, all she felt was the ache of every year she had lived without her. Grace stepped forward first, eyes already filled with tears. "Sis, we looked for you. We tried so hard to find you." They hugged tightly, and for a moment, Emily's heart broke all over again. She realized that despite everything, she still loved her sisters deeply. Her mother stood in silence, clutching her handbag, watching them. When Emily finally turned to face her, the years of silence between them felt heavier than any words. "Why are you here?" Emily's voice was steady but cold. Her mother swallowed. I heard you have a bakery." Grace found a picture online. "I came to see you." Emily stared at her, trying to find even a trace of the woman she once called Mom. But all she saw was a stranger. Then her mother said something that made Emily's knees almost buckle. "I'm sorry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a whisper, broken and late, but real. I was wrong," she continued. "I don't have any excuse. I thought choosing him was love. But I destroyed you instead. I live with that every day." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I came to ask if there's any chance you could forgive me." Emily turned away, unable to look at her. "Forgive her? How do you forgive someone who left you to starve? Who turned their back when you were a child begging for love?" Her chest ached as the old pain returned, every bruise, every cold night, every tear. But then she looked at Lily, her little girl, who was watching everything with wide, innocent eyes. And in that moment, Emily realized something. If she held on to hate, she'd only be passing it down, the same way her mother once did. She turned back, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did," she said softly. "But I can forgive you." Her mother's tears fell freely now. "Not for you," Emily continued, "but for me. For my peace. For the little girl I used to be." Then she added quietly, "And because my daughter deserves to see what love looks like even after pain." They stood there for a long time, crying. No words could fix the years that were gone, but forgiveness built a bridge that pain had long destroyed. Grace and Sophie joined in, holding their sister tight, whispering, "We missed you so much." And for the first time, Emily let them hold her without fear. Later that night, as the bakery lights dimmed, Emily sat beside my car, watching Lily sleep. She came back, she whispered. Michael nodded. And you forgave her? Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, eyes glistening. Yes, she said. Because sometimes, healing doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means choosing not to let it own you anymore. Years later, when Lily grew older and asked about her grandmother, Emily smiled sadly and said, she was a woman who made a terrible mistake. But she taught me one thing, that love is a choice. And I chose to be better. And that was the truth. Because in the end, Emily's greatest victory wasn't surviving what was done to her. It was refusing to become the same.